Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So here I am in Peterson Mews, London, in front of the house of Douglas Bader. So Bader is famous for being the only RAF pilot without any legs. Bader was born in the United Kingdom in 1910. His father was a civil engineer. So the Baders briefly moved to India. Then the First World War broke out. Bader's father was a major in the army. He was fatally wounded at a battle in Saint-Omer in France. So Bader was only about 7 when his father died. Anyway, his mother later remarried, but Douglas Bader did not get on with his stepfather. His stepfather was a clergyman, was soft-spoken, a man of God, and just a bit too genteel for Bader's needs. So Bader was a thrusting character, very much an alpha male, very macho, boorish perhaps. Reasonably academic too, though, but didn't have much refinement or appreciation of the finer things in life. Had he born a century or so earlier, he probably would have been a pirate. But anyway, so he went to various boarding schools. He went to St Edward's School in Oxford, where Guy Gibson, another famous RAF pilot, was there. So Bader distinguished himself in several sports. He was an outstanding rugby player. He was a brilliant cricketer, and he had a very competitive nature. He was a ferocious sort of person. He did not suffer fools gladly. So he wanted to join the RAF. He was offered a place at Cambridge, but his mother said that they couldn't afford it. Anyway, he joined the RAF, but he was always a daredevil. He was always taking unnecessary risks. He'd been like that as a child, quite mischievous, playing practical jokes which went a bit too far. But anyway, he crashed as part of his daredevilry and had to have both his legs amputated at Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading. And he was invalided out of the RAF, and he was irate about that. He was only 21, and his dream was shattered. So he did various jobs through the 1930s, but in 1937 he was allowed to rejoin the RAF. There was a shortage of trained pilots, so he had these wooden legs, and then he used to do various roles in his planes or loop in the loop, and he could do them better than anyone else because anyone else would pass out because the blood had to go, the body was that much bigger from the brain to the feet. Well, he didn't have anything below the hips really, so therefore there was less. His heart didn't have to pump the blood quite so far around. Anyway, the Second World War broke out, and he fought in various air battles. He shot down 22 enemy aircraft. He shared some hits, whatever you say, some credits for destroying aircraft. There were some probable ones. So he was an extraordinarily successful combat pilot. He was suicidally brave, and so he faced the high chance of death with fortitude many, many times. And he'd reacted to his disability with stoicism, no self-pity, and he was uncomplaining. So he was very elderly in that regard. Anyway, in 1941, he was shot down over France and his various prisons of war camps. Nevertheless, played cricket in the prison of war camp despite hobbling around on wooden legs. I think he needed some more wooden legs, so the RAF heard about this, so they launched a bombing raid and they dropped some wooden legs with them as well. But the Germans were immensely impressed with his gallantry, with his hardihood. So they weren't going to execute him, but some of the RAF men said they were worried that the Germans would take this badly, that you've dropped bombs and this wooden legs at the same time. But they didn't kill anyone because of that. So he was released after the war and he briefly rejoined the RAF. By 1946 he went to Shell Oil and spent the rest of his career there. So he was an irascible sort. He wasn't everybody's cup of char, and he had views which we regard as fairly shocking these days. Frank racism against non-whites. When it came to the Suez Crisis, he believed the United Kingdom should absolutely hammer the Egyptians. He supported apartheid. He spoke up for the white minority regime in Zimbabwe and called Rhodesia, things like that. He was friends with many of his former German captors and foes, despite knowing that some members of the Nazi Party, or he had rather a serviceman sort of sense of humour. One time he went to a reception in West Germany well after the war and met former Luftwaffe personnel, and he quipped, "I didn't know we left so many of you bastards alive." There's the film Reach for the Skies about him, and he went around doing his bit to raise awareness for the disabled. More had to be done for them. He'd been awarded the Distinguished Service Order with bar. With bar meaning he got it twice. The DSO, CBE Commander of the British Empire, and all sorts of honours he was lauded with. So he died of a heart attack in 1982. That is Douglas Bader. Toodaloo.